Before we get into using reports as a faster and easier way to generate runtime logs, let's take a look at how logging is normally achieved now. This is a plain English program, fairly typical, and it sits on a CX level controller. Its job is to print out some headers and then basically loop through the logs to print the values for each point. Since these points are all configured for instantaneous 15-minute logging, the program has to loop through 96 times in order to print out all the values for these points. As a side note, we'd likely have some challenges with this method if not all the points were configured to log every 15 minutes, but this is something that Reports handles automatically. So we have one of these programs for every report required. In addition to the CX level programs, there's also corresponding workstation level programs. Here's an example of one of those. At 7 a.m. each day, it runs the output from the CX level program to a file with a dynamic date comprised of year, month, and day of month. It adds a CSV extension and then ends. Using Continuum Explorer, it's easy to create a group. In this case, I've named my group Discharge Air Temperature.grp. Often these groups already exist as part of the programming for showing historical graphs. It's then easy to drag points into the group from Continuum Explorer. Here you can see that I've added a collection of inputs and outputs to the Discharge Air Temperature group. Using reports, I'll type part of a point's name, DAT1. I then press Enter, select both points, select a start date and an end date, and I'm going to leave the times as 12 a.m. on December 7th until 11:59:59 on December 7th. So just one day of logs. I'll then right-click and select Extended Logs for selected points between dates. I get a report in my browser that shows the timestamp, the name of the point, and then the values for both of those points. Taking this to another level, it would be better if we could select a group and get extended logs for all of the members in the group. In order to do that, I'll select Group, and then I'll type the name of my group, dat.grp. I get 2 items returned because each of my air handling units has a dat.grp. I'll select the first one, leave my start date and my end date the same, right-click, and select Extended Logs for points between dates. Now the report that comes back in my browser gives me the timestamp down the left-hand column, but across the top it gives me each of the points that are a member of my air handling unit group. I get the value for each point historically over time. Reports has a fairly extensive command line interface that allows for automation of many of its reports. Here's an example of running an extended log report via the command line. We use the /ext log to indicate that we want an extended log report. Then the group prefix to indicate that we want to export logs for an extended group of points. If this were for a single point, we'd omit this group prefix. Next, we specify the path and name, followed by our start date and end date. These are specified with quotes since the values inside include spaces. You can use double or single quotes. It's your choice. Finally, we specify the complete path to our output file. Again, we'd use quotes if the path included spaces. In this example, however, it does not. Our file name uses YYYMMDD within square brackets. This tells reports to replace this with the year, month, and day. Alternative macros exist. For example, YYYY for year, MM for month, DD for day, HH for hour. In all cases, values are padded with 0 if necessary. Finally, I've specified a /show to indicate that I'd like to see the resulting report. This is something you might do if you're linking the report to a pinpoint graphic. If we omitted this, the file would be created silently, which is normally the case for creating logs. If I press Enter, Reports launches and generates the requested report. The results are shown since I've specified the /show argument as part of my command line. While this is useful if I'd like to link a report to an operator via a pinpoint graphic, HTML typically isn't the format we use for long-term historical archiving. To solve this problem, we can simply replace the .html extension with .csv, and now we get a report that is generated in standard comma-separated variable format. These same files can then later be opened with Microsoft Excel or consumed by a number of third-party applications and databases. If we take a look into the CITG Reports Logs folder, we can see that the results are saved there. Once we've got the report generation working, we can schedule it through Windows Scheduler to easily run our reports every day or at a specific time, automatically generating our reports for us. But we might have a lot of these reports to run each day. How do we solve that problem? Rather than creating a task for each report, we can just create one task that launches a batch file. Within the batch file, we use the same command line statements as before, essentially just repeating our command line and changing the file names. I've repeated the report for air handling units 1 through 10 in this example. Since it's not easy to dynamically feed the start date and end date to the command line this way, instead of using them, I've just used the macro yesterday within square brackets to indicate that I'd like yesterday's data. Here you can see the scheduled task in Windows Scheduler. It's set to run at 1 a.m. every day and generate my reports by just running the batch file for me. So now you've seen an alternative to creating what can amount to be hundreds of programs on a large site. Instead, you can just drag points into continuum groups, add a line to your batch file that's scheduled via Windows Scheduler, and your logs are created daily for you. In addition, Reports doesn't require Continuum to be running. That means that you won't lose the logs if Continuum isn't running for some reason. The logging role can even be delegated to any workstation on the network and be configured in redundant ways.